The story is one of one. Championships, MVPs, a final MVP, broke the game, manipulated millions of children across the world, and well, legacy. Steph Curry will go down as one of those rare athletes that we had no idea would turn into an all-time NBA player. This unusual spectacle of a talent, and yet, here we are 14 years later, and I think we found another face somewhere on basketball Mount Rushmore. Steph Curry grew up watching his father, Del Curry, playing for the Charlotte Hornets. In 16 seasons, he was a 6'4" shooting guard who made over 1,200 three-point attempts. I remember on school nights wishing I could go to the game. My mom said, no, you can't go to the game on school nights because we won't be home until 11 or 12. When he had Friday or Saturday night games, that was the biggest deal to us. We knew we were going to the game that night. He was influenced by watching his father play. I was a competitive guy. I loved all the sports I played, but there was something about basketball and doing what your dad did. It had more of a draw to it. Curry realized he wanted to play college basketball by the 8th grade. Unfortunately, he was just 5'6" and 125 pounds by the time he was a sophomore in high school. He invented a shot method where he shot from his waist since he lacked strength. To develop his shooting form, he had to practice shots throughout the whole summer. College recruiters said he was too little despite having a new and better shot. He was eventually recruited by Davidson College in North Carolina. The big institutions didn't recruit him, according to the head coach. The big schools didn't recruit him because of his appearance. I think his size, his stature, people just saw him as a guard that was a dime a dozen. It was one of the biggest college basketball duels of all time, when two of the top prospects of the upcoming 2009 NBA draft faced off against each other. Steph Curry versus star big man Blake Griffin. What made this game even more special was some of the people who were actually in attendance that day. LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook. LeBron was arguably the best player in the world, and KD and Russ were already rising to stardom as a duo in the NBA looking to take the next step. And they all came to watch the 6'3" babyface looking point guard go up against what many believed would become the next best NBA prospect in the 6'10" tall Blake Griffin. But even with a loss, Steph showed up and showed out with 44 points and an epic shooting display that had everyone's jaw dropping, and I gotta say, KD, LeBron, and Russ were all hyped. No one could begin to imagine just what Steph Curry would go on to do in his NBA career. Scouts labeled Steph as someone who lacks proper shot selection, and get this, his first step is average at best. And considering his skinny frame and poor explosiveness around the basket and traffic, it's unlikely that he'll be able to get to the free throw line anywhere near as much as in the NBA as he does in college. I don't know what that dude was thinking either, so let's just leave that for now and think about hitting that subscribe button to be part of Home for Hoops NBA community. And now let me ask you this. For those of you who are old enough and do remember when Steph Curry was drafted, how many of you honestly would have predicted that barely 6'2" point guard would even enter the discussion for, forget the top 10 or 15, even the top 5 of the NBA all time? Steph was the same guy who a vast majority of scouts labeled as weak, a bit fragile, and someone who would struggle to hang with the bigger, faster, stronger, and freakishly athletic NBA bodies. But little did they consider that the game was about ready to enter a phase of transformation and revolution because of him.
Well, it just reminded me that this is the greatest shooter since mankind existed. I've never seen a shooter greater than Steph Curry. I mean, it's off the dribble, it's spot up, it's anywhere on the floor, it's his movement without the basketball, it's catch and shoot, it's taking you off the dribble, it's spotting up. This brother is the greatest shooter we have ever seen. Period.
Well, this just reminded me that, period. Here's Curry's for the record. It's good. I will be the first one to tell you when looking at a pic of Steph in college or his first few seasons in the league, like, what? Him? He's going to be arguably one of the 10 best players of all time. And that brings us to the time Steph Curry officially took center stage as one of the most promising young players in all of the NBA when he walked into the MECCA of basketball, Madison Square Garden, one night in 2013. During this performance for the record books, Steph drilled an impossible 11 three-pointers on 13 attempts and shot 18 for 28 overall from the floor. Like, let me tell it to you straight. This was all the way back in 2013, 10 years ago, far from the NBA we see today, so Steph hit 11 three-pointers was almost like something out of a video game. This was back in an era where it was rare to see a guy hit even 6 or 7 threes in a game. And Steph did that? Yeah, he did. The ultra-efficient Steph was ripping all net on nearly every shot from distance, and at least at the time, put together the greatest shooting performance in a single game in the history of basketball. In the history of basketball! And then Steph famously ran up the court, shimmying to the other end of the court and ignoring any high fives anyone tried to give him. And he did this all playing a game-high 48 minutes. This was 2 years before Steph's first MVP, and 2 years before his first NBA title. And of course, long before he started doing his stirring of the pot and night-night celebrations. And still, even before the entire league would catch on to the new age three-point shooting party and letting threes fly from places on the court they previously thought they'd never, ever try in an actual NBA game. What's crazier about all this is that Steph Curry's performance came roughly 10 days after the NBA All-Star Game. And if you think back to the 2013 NBA All-Star Game, you'll probably remember that Steph Curry wasn't even selected as an All-Star that year. All-Star? Nah. That man went on to break the NBA from that point on, won titles, won MVPs, became the first $200 million contract man in the history of the sport. And he's only shown that he's more deserving of a contract that large. Because to this day, even now at 35 years old, Steph is as good as ever. I mean, Michael Jordan, who is arguably the most efficient scorer of all time, never shot better than 50% from the field after his 8th season in the NBA. And that's after shooting at least 51% for 5 straight seasons from 1987 to 1991. Kobe, Kareem, Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, no all-time great has retained their maximum efficiency in the advanced stages of their career, except for Steph Curry. Steph is shooting a remarkable 53% from the floor, a near 6% jump from his career shooting percentage of 47.5%. That is next-level greatness we're witnessing. Well, age might degrade your efficiency numbers, your athleticism may wane, and you might not be as strong or as agile as you once were, but here's the thing. Steph's game was never dependent on his athleticism or strength. The fact that defenses are afraid enough of Steph's shooting ability, as long as he still has his ball handling to go along, Steph's game may age more gracefully than any other historically great player, and became the first guy ever with a baby face to be feared by the entire NBA because he can do things with his right arm that no other man or woman can do on planet Earth. Enough said, like this is just one of those things you simply cannot argue against. To pay some respect to the three-point master himself, I'll give you 3 seconds to subscribe to the channel. 3, 2, 1, let's go! Thanks for your support and see you in the next video.